Zoomer, take back my privacy? Or what is out there permanently lost? Like, how do we balance our privacy and the use of consumer devices? What can I do to protect myself other than giving up all technology, which really isn't practical in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, this is the central question. So again, when we look back at this structurally, systemically, what is wrong? All these records about you are out there, held by other people. Now, the information is about you, but it's owned by everybody and controlled by everybody but you. How can it be that the phone company has a record of everywhere you've ever been, every phone call that you have ever made, because you're young enough to be within, that 1987 that AT&T is holding call records going back to, for example. How can it be that they have it, they control it, and you have no say over it?
Currently, employers are allowed to secretly monitor employees, as no federal law exists that requires them to inform their workers about surveillance.
This is a failure of U.S. law. The U.S. is basically unique in developed democracies in that we have no basic privacy law. We have only the Fourth Amendment, which only binds the government, state and federal, primarily federal and in certain cases state. Corporations are basically free to do whatever they want.
Some employers are turning to software to monitor what their employees are doing all day long. The technology does things like take screen grabs or monitor how long they're active on their computer.
In the EU, we see efforts like the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, where they're trying to start to regulate these activities. But they still haven't recognized the prime problem. They see it as a data protection problem. They think it was not a consensual exchange, but if they just put a cookie warning up on a site or say the site can't do it this way or that way, all the data they collect is okay as long as they protect it, they say what uses they're for, they not sell it onwards or do these other things. But we don't have a data protection problem. We have a data collection problem. The problem is that too many people can collect too much about too great a population.
Software companies say it allows employers to see how productive their employees have been. So Nick, explain exactly how this technology works.
The basic idea is that your employer has access to understanding what you do on your computer. It can be through your webcam. There's some systems that allow the employer to watch you at any moment. And there's some that constantly photograph your screen, like every 5 seconds, and can almost create a rolling video of what you're doing at every point. So they can see every single thing you type in, and at the end of the day, your boss or somebody in the human resources department can see all the things you type.
And then it's theirs. This is an artifact of failing U.S. law. It's actually a Supreme Court case called Smith versus Maryland. It's a 1970s vintage court case that's basically about threatening phone calls made to some woman. And this woman had a suspicion that she knew who the person was, because after one of these, breathy phone calls or whatever, she saw some creeper driving real slowly past her house. And so she wrote down her plate number. She calls the police. She says, "Can you look into this guy? Is he the one who made these phone calls?" The cops could have gone and gotten a warrant and gotten those records, but they didn't. They figure, we'll just go to the phone company, we'll just ask them to share the records, and we'll see. Plate number's either the guy or it's not. Open and shut case, right? It was the guy, right? Creeper's gonna creep. Now, his defense attorney said this was a violation of the Fourth Amendment and everything like that. He had a privacy interest in these records. They could not be expected to have been known, and the cops needed a warrant to get it. And they should have needed a warrant to get it. But the courts knew the guy was a creeper, right? And so they were reluctant to just let him walk. And at the same time, the cops had a reasonable suspicion that it might be this guy. And they weren't getting the records from the guy. They were getting the records from the phone companies. And so the way the courts threaded this needle is they went, well, they were the phone company's property. And you can decide to do whatever you want with your own property. So if they decided voluntarily to give this information to the cops, Cops didn't need a warrant. And this went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually agreed, because it's the 1970s. It's one creeper making a threatening phone call. Well, the government of the United States and most governments around the world took this principle called the third-party doctrine and made it the global standard. Basically, they went, well, records about someone held by a third party are not the property of the person the records are about. They're the property of the third party, so they can do whatever they want.
We take a number of data points, be it a CRM tool that they're currently using, a phone system like a Vonage, an email system. We aggregate all those data points in a real-time proprietary dashboard. We record and transcribe all your phone calls. All of it is recorded. We use AI tools to massage that into a real-time score that you see, as does your boss and the CEO and the VP of sales and the chief revenue officer. Everyone is seeing the productivity.
This made sense in the 1970s. It does not make sense when everyone, everywhere can make records about every person that is not them easily, cheaply, automatically, and basically use it in increasingly harmful and toxic ways. I think we will see this doctrine revisited within your lifetimes, at least. The reality is right now, nobody wants to deal with this because they want the legislature to act. The courts go, look, this is standing, it's settled law. If you guys have a problem with it, you should just pass the law. And they could. Congress could change the law tomorrow.
My name is Edward Snowden. I go by Ed.
But the person responsible for one of the greatest national security leaks in recent American history apparently insisted that his identity be made public after he fled the country.
In 2013, I didn't know who Edward Snowden was. I had no idea he would become the whistleblower responsible for the biggest leak of top secret documents in history.
This company, the CEO's name I think is Shalev Julio, is run in Israel. It was previously owned actually by an American venture capital firm. I believe they've been rebought out, but it doesn't really matter. Their entire business is preying on flaws in the critical infrastructure of all the software running on the most popular devices in the world. The number one target, right, is the iPhone. And this is because the iPhone, as secure as it is relative to a lot of other phones, is a monoculture, right? Like if you have an iPhone, you get these little software update notifications all the time that are like, hey, please update to the most recent version of iOS. And that's a fabulous thing. That's a wonderful thing for security. Because the number one way that people's devices get screwed, if it's not just through user error, right, like you entering your password somewhere you shouldn't, it's like a fake site that looks like Gmail, but it's not actually Gmail, and you just gave the guy your password, now he uses your password to log in. But to actually break into a device is that it's not patched, right? Patch means getting these security updates, these little code updates that fix holes that researchers found in the security of the device. Well, Apple's really good about rolling these out all the time for everybody in the world. The problem is basically all these different iPhones, right? You got an iPhone 6, you got an iPhone 8, you got an iPhone X, you got an iPhone, 3, whatever. These are all running a pretty narrow band of software versions. And so these guys go, if they want to target, for example, Android phones, like Google phones, like a Samsung Galaxy or something like that. There's like 1 billion different phones made by 1 billion different people. Half of them are completely out of date. But what it means is it's not one version of software they're running, it's like 10,000. And this is actually bad for security on the individual level. But it's good for security in a very unusual way, which is the guys who are developing the exploits. The guys like this NSO group who are trying to find ways to break into phones. They now have to have like 50 different handsets running 50 different versions of software. They're all changing. They've got different hardware. They've got different chipsets. They've got different, like all kinds of just technical variables that can screw up the way they attack your phone. And then when they find one, it only works on like this Samsung Galaxy line. It doesn't work on like the Google Pixel line, or it doesn't work on like a Nokia line or something like that. Whereas they realize if they find a way to attack an iPhone, which is actually, this is difficult. This is really difficult stuff. Now, it works against basically every iPhone. And who has iPhones? All the rich people, right? All the important people, all the lawmakers, all the guys who are in there. So they've made a business on basically attacking the iPhone and selling it to every 2-bit thug who runs a police department in the world. They sell this stuff to Saudi Arabia. They sell this to Mexico. And there's a group of researchers in Canada working at a university called the Citizen Lab. And these guys are really like the best in the world at tracking what NSO Group is doing. If you want to learn about this stuff, the real stuff, look up Citizen Lab and the NSO Group.